Recording. Wow. So you said you accidentally sold a tramadol on Tarkov?
Yeah, for like 5,000 rubles instead of
Oh,
59,000.
that sucks. Well, we're gonna get started here. This is my good friend here, Brooks, and this is the BSIT podcast. Welcome, and we're sponsored here, and we work for Blacksmith IT, Easy Help and Honest Answers. All right, man. It's been an interesting day. We've had I think the House passed the bill for for the debt ceiling. The Texas House passed their bill too. Apparently they were having fights. We have all types of crazy news. I just got off the 4 hour live for the NASA live streams about the public meeting for the UFO study.
Mm-hmm.
To surmise it is there's a lot of ways we just use the word UFO as a generic term, but there's lots of things out there, mainly weather balloons. And I'm like, wow, they haven't changed from the 60s, have they?
I mean, technically, it just means unidentified flying object. Identify meaning does it carry a transponder? So
Oh
they're
my
not
gosh.
technically wrong, but that's actually what UFO means.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean,
Qualification for it's pretty loose.
it is pretty loose. I think it's pretty freaking hilarious though. Oh my gosh. So today, let's talk about some top news going on. It looks like the House debt ceiling votes near the what's it? See, it's Associated Press. It goes House debt ceiling vote nears to avert default with Biden and McCarthy both confident of passage. I don't know what that means though. Let's see what they're saying here.
Well, it means the president and the speaker think it's probably going to happen, but I highly doubt it ultimately goes through because
Yeah.
as it's currently laid out, it's most likely not going to pass muster, but we will see.
Well, have
We
have you
need it to
been?
happen, but I don't know if
Yeah.
it's going to.
Have you by chance? What's his name? Is it Brian Donald? Is he's the rep from Florida, right?
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, he was just out there saying, "Nobody sign it. They're lying to us."
Well, there's a bunch of other garbage in it that nobody actually wants except for the current progressive parties of the
Yeah.
US.
Oh, in any
The
case,
rhinos.
so we're coming up to that. Does that how does that affect tech when we're
It
running up the
affects
debt
taxation.
ceiling?
I mean, the
I mean,
biggest thing is all of the private party partners that get paid by the government are
yeah,
one of the first to go.
yeah,
So, government internet access, reimbursements for cell phones, grants that get funded quarterly, that stuff all gets halted. Um, Other than that, I don't know, not a whole lot. Defense contractors are still going to do their thing. The military does stop getting paid, so does the postal service. The last time this happened, we didn't have mail for a few days.
mhm,
So, I mean, there are effects, but at the state level, not much changes because the government pays its state bills like quarterly or yearly.
yeah.
So, like, your local government doesn't shut down if the federal government does.
Got
So,
it. Well, you
theoretically,
well,
it doesn't
tech
matter.
wise, you've worked in data centers for a very long time, including purchasing, building materials, cost acquisition, other stuff like that. I mean, what do you normally see on these type of election cycles or debt ceiling cycles or anything like that?
The election cycle is different.
Okay.
So, anytime you have a change in the current prevailing political party, it's going to affect all kinds of things because taxes primarily. A lot of people preload what they think the worst possible outcome for tax is going to be into their pricing whenever they do updates. So depending on if you're in an election cycle or not, or if your party has won or not, it's going to affect how pricing works. An unfortunate side effect of that as well is anytime there's a bunch of extra regulations coming down the pipe, that tends to get priced in. So consumers start paying for things sometimes years before it ever actually comes to pass as a law or some form of enforceable ruling. When you're looking at the additional fees for like bandwidth costs and stuff like that, or import taxes, I know that there was a big concern that we'd have a bunch of new tariffs not that long ago, and it greatly affected availability and pricing. People were holding things before they came in, even regardless of COVID, because they were concerned that there would be more tariffs on like China or some of the countries where we get things from. And tariffs don't really affect companies, they only affect the end purchaser, which is usually a consumer. Businesses prearrange their pricing years in advance, especially on the tech side. We tend to buy like on 2 to 5 year cycles. So we try to buy like pre-negotiate our rate is. So if I need to, I don't know, order 55,000 hard drives or something, I'm going to preset a price and do bulk buy and just have my shipments come in. So pricing won't affect deals like that, but on new deals get greatly affected by it.
Got it. Got it. So, I mean, we're in that cycle. Stuff costs more. We also, I think, we're also in a hardware cycle, aren't we? Right now, with all the new tech coming in, with a lot of stuff going out. Like I was reading reports. Was it? I think it was Colorado with all of the all the Chromebooks.
Yeah, so Chromebooks are a unique conversation. They're ridiculously cheap. They have some fantastic use and some fantastic use cases, but they are designed to be disposable. There was a big push for Chromebooks to go into schools. And it's great because it's cheap and it gives access to a lot of really good features. It's got a ton of great management. The bad thing is schools tend to try and keep their gear for 3 years. Chromebooks are designed to be replaced every 18 months. So you end up with this big backlog of products that are designed to depreciate very, very, very rapidly. Manufacturers don't support long-term hardware support for them. So if batteries, keyboards, screens, they all go bad, they get broken, they get untold bodily fluids put on them. Uh, you have to make sure the ones that you're buying are designed for your support life cycle. So the college in Colorado and the high schools in Colorado right now are having problems because they've got like 20,000 Chromebooks they can't do anything with because there are no replacement parts. And the manufacturer's like, you bought a product designed to expire in 18 months. It's been 2 years. We're not required to support it. The other thing is that Google, about a year and a half ago, maybe 14, 15 months ago, decided to do an architecture change and make it so that they just stopped supporting a couple of hundred different versions of Chromebooks on the marketplace. They moved away from all their LTS support on that stuff a couple of years ago. They started actually enforcing it a while ago. So also all new Chromebooks have to be 64-bit, and a lot of the cheaper ARM ones are not really 64-bit. They started requiring a minimum of 4 gigs of RAM. A lot of them are 2 gigs of RAM and minimum storage of 64 gigs because the Chrome OS has gotten pretty bloated as they try and keep feature parity with some of the other thin client style applications. And honestly, iPads are eating their margin like crazy. Even though they're more expensive, they're guaranteed to last 3 to 4 years minimum from Apple. And it's really kind of eaten everyone's lunch in the Chromebook space. But that's primarily a Google problem. They were a great value when they first came out, up until a couple of years ago, when Google started shifting away from long-term support and more into this is a device that we need to make sure is dead in 18 months so it can be replaced. And it's left a lot of companies that bought on the hype of Chromebooks kind of in a lurch. And a lot of municipalities spent really good money on them in a lurch because they cannot do anything with this hardware. Departments are like Frankensteining them together to make them work, which only makes them work less reliably. And you have students that are without equipment. It's an interesting situation to be in that could have been resolved if Google had just stuck with their original plan of proper long-term support and manufacturers hadn't tried to price themselves down. I mean, you get some Chromebooks for like $65 with like 12-inch screens. That's a product that probably has like a $2 margin. They're not
Yeah.
going to support it past the point of sale. And schools are like, "Whoa, $65. Let's buy 3,000 of them." And that's where they're at.
Yeah. No, I
I want
mean,
to say Acer is the vendor in or Asus is the vendor in Colorado.
yeah,
And they
that's
dropped a ton of them.
yeah, that's crazy. I mean, I sit there and think about it. I mean, one, obviously it's unupgradable, right? Because everything's soldered on. The memory
Hmm.
soldered on, everything soldered on. I mean, which we can say the same thing for, like iPads here, which is funny because I will admit I didn't use a lot of Apple products just because, I worked in the tech world. I literally worked for IBM when they had the monochromatic green rim, right?
Hmm.
So I went from rim to like the first BlackBerry to which was I had a blast playing Brick on that to the BlackBerry, whatever, the Bold, what all the way up, and then kind of you what the natural inclination was to go from BlackBerry to Android as an engineer, as opposed to
Hmm.
most executives was everyone loved their Bold, and then they went from the Bold to the first few iPhones, right? Um,
Yeah, the big thing about the iPhone was the addition of iMessage and the App Store that came with the
yeah.
3G. That's what really cemented the executive buy-off. Because BlackBerry led the pack for the longest time. Even like celebrities, like that was a thing.
Oh yeah, it was
You
everybody.
could,
Well,
they wanted it.
it ran on its own encrypted servers on its backbone,
Hmm.
right? Everything had to run on its own servers. Everyone had to run on its own networks, and it backbone every fiber line and every internet line out there. It was great. It just was unsupportable long term, right? I,
Well, and BBM was like the first group message
yep.
system that you could have on a cell phone because like group text messages weren't a thing. And your contact list moved with you. It had rich media sharing options for the time anyway. And it was like a big deal. And all the messages were encrypted because it was a security and business focused device first that like regular people adopted with features. They're like, oh man, this is so cool. I can have like whatever, like my coffee friends or brunch girls or whatever the heck it is you wanted to label your BBM groups, and you could have all those put together. And there was nothing like that at the time. Like RIM really led the pack for a
Yeah.
very, very, very long time.
Which
And ironically, the thing that killed them was the tight control. They did not want to add smartphone features to their enterprise focused device, but consumers were the ones continuing to buy it.
well, yeah.
Businesses stopped buying it 2 years after the
Well,
iPhone came out because the
business
iPhone offered
is
encrypted
the
messaging.
well. One, I wanted to clarify everyone. When I say RIM, it's research in motion. I'm not sure if anyone knows that, but it's research in motion. But two, I don't know if you remember, businesses went Palm for the longest time
Hmm.
as the interim in between everything, and the Palm
Yeah,
just
with the
killed it
Palm
with every
OS.
yeah with the Palm OS and killed it and everything else. And let's not talk about the Windows iOS Dell Venue Pros. But fun random story. I when I was working for IBM, speaking of business, let's see, sorry, speaking of business, it was freaking hilarious because we weren't allowed to call it downloading our email to our devices or downloading our tasks. It was no, you're replicating it, and I think I got chastised
Mhm.
about 4 or 5 times. Ben, but no, Ben, you can't call it that. It's replicating down to your phone. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, I
Yeah,
apologize.
that's an old Lotus Domino thing because they got sued over that. That's why you replicated the databases. That was the, Lotus Notes was here so that like Outlook could fly the way it is now because
Yeah.
none
Oh,
of like Exchange
absolutely.
didn't even exist at the way it was basically like a SMTP gateway, POP gateway service that
Yeah.
was bolted into stuff, and IBM was just slaughtering the competition with
Yeah.
Domino and Lotus. But because it bolted Outlook like features and Microsoft Access features into one application, and then gave you worldwide replication. Like
Yeah.
it's companies still run it, and they run it for a
Oh, it's
reason.
yeah,
I wouldn't want to run it anymore,
it's
but
brilliant, but it cracks me up that I always laughed at. I always kind of laughed at that whole process because it was always particular with words and particular with things. And
hmm.
when I joined IBM, that's actually was in the trans. It's funny because there's two transition errors I was in when I joined IBM. I was an SSR or whatever the case is, but I ended up working like every major transition just because I was a body and I could go over there and I was young. So like I worked the token ring to Ethernet migration for Morgan Stanley. Insane. And that would when I say transition though, it was the transition where you started seeing everyone get away from the suit and tie. Because if you remember everything from I don't know 1980 to I would say 2000, 2002, IBM Pro systems, everybody was just no, you had to wear a suit and tie when you go to work when you
Yeah, that was a
against everybody
Perot
else.
thing though. When
Yeah,
when you worked for, remember when Dan used to work for EDS,
yeah,
and that was the thing is you came to work in a suit and tie, you had
yep.
respect. You nobody wore like jeans were just not a thing,
Well, yeah.
and it's such a crazy environment.
Well, what's
You're right,
crazy,
everyone wore it.
yeah. So, and funny is, so when I moved, I ended up getting a job at Perot Systems in their was it IDS department or whatever, or IGS department, which was kind of a specialization group doing strike team stuff, big ass projects and everything else. But it was the first time they let vendors like the Coke vendor and the other vendors on site in like the shorts and their uniform clothes instead of like
Mhm.
a full outfit, which was insane. And they were it was funny because they were really trying to, I don't know if they're trying to copy Apple or somebody else, but they were really pushing, hey, you are allowed to come in a shirt with no tie, but it still needed to be a button up shirt.
I think that's more the reality of the environment we
Yeah.
that EDS was in, primarily, which is Texas.
Yeah.
In summertime, coming in like a four-piece suit, it's 108 degrees
Oh,
outside,
absolutely.
you
Yeah.
get a lot of kickback. Then again, working for Perot it's a huge, I mean, so many like large companies spun out of EDS. We're
Yep.
talking like large three-letter contractors came out of EDS and out of
Yeah.
that world. And it's hard to argue with the effectiveness, whether or not we agree with some of the policy. The effectiveness was there, and it was a consistent management thing. And the vendors too, part of that, Ben. I remember when I went to the Dallas
Yeah.
campus, the vendors were pushing back that they could not outfit their people and
Yep.
meet the rest of their logistics. So the ultimate decision on that came down to billing. It was fine. You wanted to change, you want to buy a suit, you buy the suits, you provide a facility for them to change into, and you deal with the downtime and additional cost of delivery.
Yeah.
And when they looked at it that way, it was like, okay. And
Yeah,
that's why they
what's
changed it.
crazy is I got the one of the guys I worked with over there. He was a long time Perot dude before they switched over and got bought out by Dell then resold to NTT Data. They it was insane. He used to tell me, he goes, Ben, he goes, I just don't like it. I can't believe they let people in here without suits. I'm like, why? It's hot. It's freaking 100 and something degrees
Hmm.
outside. And they're like, well, that's just so disrespectful. I'm like, woo, the culture was big. Uh, which is funny because I don't know if that was more of a pro junior thing or a pro senior thing. Not that pro senior wasn't very big on suits and outfits, but I got to meet Perot Senior over there, and at the lunch table, literally, he still went every day there, drove his DeVille, swerved around a bunch of people, and then went and ate lunch inside there every day. And I got to talk with him for a little bit, and I don't know if maybe from age or anything else, but he was way more laid back than I would have thought.
So I know them both. Well, I'm obviously new because senior's dead, but
Yeah,
I know them both pretty well. And I would say the suit thing came from senior because he was,
yeah, maybe.
like if you came to a meeting and you were not put together,
Hmm.
properly put together for that meeting, yeah, you were immediately asked to leave, most likely barred from reentry for a while, and
Wow.
had to prove that you were like there's a rigidly enforced structure of decorum
Hmm.
and of us, and it wasn't even how you wore your suit. If it was a poorly done suit,
Yeah.
you were asked to leave. If
Wow.
you didn't have everything right, you were asked to leave. The other thing too is none of them offices were especially cool in the summer. They did not keep the
No,
AC that low.
no,
Uh,
I was in the older offices where some of the stuff was at, and oh my gosh, was it hot in there, and it smelled like a library that was built like
mhm.
50 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, basically everyone sweat. We all kept extra shirts and undershirts, and I had two
Yeah.
jackets when I was there for a little while. And because I'm a big dude. I'm 6'3", I'm 280, got a big old full beard, which is also something that was a big deal being there.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't have a beard, you couldn't have a lot of facial hair. It was just a big deal.
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah, big deal. That was
I,
crazy though. Yeah.
but when you worked there, though, the company took great care of all of their employees,
Oh, they
down from
did.
the janitor all the way up to the
I
executive. They were
had
all treated the same.
I had the best insurance. Day one, there was no waiting 60
Hmm.
days or anything else. Day one, the best insurance, the best, like they give you a mentor as a mentor program. As a part of the next gen leadership program. I was pulled into every little thing, whatever the case was. As Dell took over, a lot of that lost sight, and it kind of just went downhill enough where Dell just basically was losing money on their services. And I mean, we had $250 million contracts for data center migrations, operational transitions, healthcare, all of the above. Like Dell Services worked tenant for a lot of their stuff
Yeah.
and everything else, but obviously tenant is tenant, and if you've worked on tenant, you hate life. But yeah, it's just kind of a crazy culture with everything else, with everything compared to now. It's
Yeah.
I got to a point as an architect level, and I think, I mean, you did too in kind of your tenure in the industry, where I showed up literally in a polo and board shorts. No, I mean not board shorts, but like the walking
Yeah.
shorts with a belt on or whatever. I mean, it looked like I was about to go play a game of golf.
Yeah, depending on the client, yeah. Sometimes I
Yeah.
still had to go like in a full suit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely got to the point where one, I didn't even walk into an office for less than $1,000, and two,
Yeah.
I was not gonna wear whatever you told me to wear. But
Yeah.
that was also like '06, I guess, '05,
Oh
'06,
wow.
when I was doing stuff like that because the culture had shifted. It was okay. I was also on the West Coast for some of that.
Oh, it took
And they
years.
really didn't care much on the West Coast. When I was at the Win, it's different. At the Win, you were always in slacks and a branded polo and stuff.
Yeah.
But even even when you were outside or at like one of the DCs or something, you were still had to be an appropriate representative. But a lot of that too is because Steve Wynn has, much like Perot, has a very particular way he expects his
Yeah.
staff to be. And if they're there representing his brand, they're there representing him. And his name is on the door, so he's pretty
Well,
adamant.
I
But like
mean,
when I worked for Sands Group, they didn't really care.
if you go to the Win though, it is a different world. Like okay, even compared to Caesars, like if you go to Caesars now and you go to Win now, not that Caesars isn't bad. It's Caesars is one of my favorite places to go because it doesn't typically smell like smoke and you don't smell like smoke really leaving there because the filtration is phenomenal.
Yeah,
The Win is kind of the same thing, but it just feels more upscale when you're over there.
yeah. You do you remember when the Vegas had like the big casino crash in like '08 when the rest of the world was, or the rest of the U.S. anyway, was crashing? The Wynn was the last casino to write their prices down
Wow.
because the idea being, look, we sell a premium service where people have money, the U.S. doesn't have money. Most of their money came from China at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, it's Vegas. Most of it still does.
Yeah.
Um, but they didn't, like, we raised prices more often than we lowered them.
Yeah.
And he kept up that everything is a premium. We were also building Encore at the time. That's why I was there, was to build Encore, was the Win Phase 2.
Yeah.
And they didn't really stop any of that process. He's like, he had the foresight to, one, be reminded that they're sitting on $2.5 billion in cash they can afford to bleed, and two, projecting power gives power traditionally.
Yeah.
And I mean, Wynn reshaped that entire corner of the strip during that time because they just didn't let things like that change how they were going to do business or price it. They didn't want to race to the bottom and get a race to the bottom kind of person to come in and gamble. They wanted continuous high rollers. It's also when we built Wynn Macau, which was a crazy investment.
Hmm.
Um, it was a different time, to be sure.
Oh yeah, way different. Yeah, just culture has changed so much. It's nice with people. I mean, especially with working home and everything else, and it's definitely a different world. Like even with all the Perot stuff. So if you ever, I mean, you've been to that campus. It was a legacy to Perot seniors. They
Mhm.
had the President's Hall where they had like every president. They have the Family Hall of photos on the other side where they had a painted picture of every one of them. They had so many different things. Um, they just had a ton of million different things over there, and I know a lot of it ended up getting like donated over. Like part of it got donated to the
Mhm.
Perot Museum, part of it got taken home
Mhm.
when Dell bought out and everything else. Well, now NTT Data. But
Yeah.
anyways, I digress. It was just an interesting story with how everything is, and even now, kind of how people are being expected. Like it's just even communication, right? Everything was a face to face, eye to eye. I'm gonna talk with you type of engineering style and everything else, minus the people that just sat in their corners and stuff like that. But I was reading just the recent news article from Wired. It was for some autistic people, ChatGPT is a lifeline, which
Mhm.
is a super interesting article. I went and read it. It's for people on the spectrum essentially, and I kind of was wondering. I'm like, are they using it for coding? Are they using it for anything else? They're
They use
using
it for
it.
linguistics.
They're using it for linguistics, but specifically through the article, they're using it as someone to talk to, which I didn't even think about because they say the way ChatGPT talks to them back is ChatGPT makes no social or emotional assumptions and just talks to them basically with black and white information.
Yeah.
Which I mean, that's something that I can do. It's took me a very long time to understand essentially the even 10%, 25% of the nuances of social interaction and everything else. It's hard work for people who aren't naturally inclined to that, which is, majority of the world. And it's like 75% of the world or something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just crazy. So like I'm reading it here. Um, let's see what's here we go. Maddie Young is a consultant in Seattle and has learned to perform the social behaviors and body language that neurotypical people expect. But it's called masking essentially. It's something that I did too as young. You essentially mimic or mask or whatever the case is. But she goes on to say in there, a lot of autistic people have grown up being told that they're aliens or that they sound like robots or there's just something wrong with them. When ChatGPT came along, they quickly realized that it kind of sounded like I do, very logical,
Yeah.
very specific,
Yeah.
very spatial too, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I, I understand the using the tool like that for its therapeutic benefit, but it's also important to teach people how to be functional in society. My concern is, there's nothing wrong with doing it, but if it's your only way of secondary communication with the world, it's obviously going to become a problem because it's not going to force you to be as uncomfortable as you sometimes need to be to grow and to
Mm-hmm.
learn. And that would really be my only concern with it. I mean, I'm like you, I have pretty severe ADD, ADHD,
Mm-hmm.
even as an adult, and I've got a lot of interesting coping skills for it. And if I'd had a way to just escape to someone that only sound like me, it still becomes an echo chamber.
Yeah.
And echo chambers are dangerous for development, for social development, and just for, general knowledge development. So that would really be my only concern is if it becomes the kind of thing that we're like, hey, just go do this for a couple hours a day to get some coping. The minute that resource isn't available, then you lose all coping skills because that's the one you've focused your efforts on learning and maintaining. So that would really be my only concern with it. But it is pretty true. For the most part, it's conversational, but it's not kind. People
Yes.
tend to speak kindly. So we add a bunch of flower and flourish to our language and to how we act. And to us, it's just like mimicking being a friendly person because friendly people get like those that get along get better in life. That's what an old
So
Southern saying.
I would say, do people who have issues find ChatGPT to be kind though, even though it is an echo chamber? So one of the things that Chilton and I were talking about was talking with ChatGPT, and one of the things that we do is we go, "Thank you," or "I appreciate it," or "Can you do this for me?" And ChatGPT would reply, "Oh yeah, no problem. Thank you very much for asking this question," or whatever the case is. And it's almost like the nuances that people hope to expect from obviously other people who want them to understand. So I'm wondering if that's maybe how people see it. It is a kindness that they maybe may not see or understand from other people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, hell, when I talk to my smart devices, I say thank you all the time, and everyone makes fun of me for it. My joke, of course, is when the robot overlords come, they'll remember I was the kind one,
Yeah.
which is, of course, a joke. But
Well, I mean, not
uh,
not not according to one of the core creators of AI. He think
well, yeah.
Yeah, he thinks that everything's cataclysmic.
And we talked about this the other day. A big thing with AI is that we need to give it like Asimov's rule of robotics.
Yeah.
We need to give it like rules of AI. It needs a certain set of things it simply can't go past. Teach it to code, that's fine within boundaries. And the reason is that AIs don't understand context yet. And I don't know that they're ever truly going to because they're not really capable of as it stands right now and the way we train them and use them, they're not capable of actual free thought. It's all at the end of the day some form of statistics based response.
Yeah.
And the problem with looking at solely numbers is you can rapidly form a bias and make the bias be the default. It, human nature, as it sits today, anyway, and how we operate and have operated for a few thousand years, is you know using our bias to make rapid filtering decisions. And it's useful if you're trying to decide if a plant is poisonous or something. And we say things like leaves are three, let it be. So anytime we see someone leaves are three, we assume it's poison ivy.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean every leave of three is poison ivy any more than looking at like raw crime statistics is going to give you, a guaranteed outcome for every engagement. Just looking at that based on who you're coming across.
Well,
And
yeah, I
the
mean,
concern with,
uh, no, go ahead. I'm
no, what
sorry.
were you gonna say?
No,
No,
go
what
ahead.
were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, it. Yeah, I mean, we have an ingrained nature. Is what I was thinking of. It's like spiders. Why are we naturally afraid of spiders, right? I mean, there's some people that
Yeah.
aren't, but a majority of people are afraid of spiders. There's the fear of. Have you ever seen that plant where it's got a bunch of like holes in it, and it's like the fear of holes, like in your skin and stuff like that. Like it
I,
just,
I don't, so that
yeah,
part of my form of ADD,
yeah,
at least my part of it anyway, it's like I don't have that part of your brain that makes you afraid of things.
yeah,
So I don't share normal fears. Well, we talked about this yesterday in the after the meeting.
yeah.
Like I don't like clowns. I don't like I don't like clowns. I don't mind people in masks, but I don't like painted faces, which means I also really don't care for women that wear a lot of excessive makeup.
Mm-hmm.
But it just it's just a thing. My brain is like, uh-oh, clowns are bad. I don't know why clowns are bad. I have huge feet. I should be okay with big shoes. I have a big nose. Sometimes it's red when I drink a lot. So I should be okay with a red nose, but I just can't do it, man. They
Oh,
freak me
you know
out.
what's something interesting? Which, if you guys get a chance, Vin Wiki is one of my favorite YouTube. If you love cars
Mhm.
at all, phenomenal. They have Ben Collins on there as the
Mhm.
stick, basically, and he was talking. He just did a big segment and released it yesterday, or the day before, and he talked about the scariest people he drove with to teach for the celebrity in a reasonably priced car were comedians, because comedians were missing the part of their brain for the most part that he saw that told them to stop, because all they did was laugh, and they kept going faster, and they kept pushing the car, and there was nothing in their brain saying be scared.
Yeah. Like it's a real some of it is like caused by trauma, some of it's a
Yeah.
genetic thing. Like there is a portion of your brain that dictates
Mm-hmm.
fear. You can have an over or underdeveloped sense of it. People with severe, like my kind of ADD, we have an incredibly underdeveloped sense of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, man. Like I'd be the first person to go base jumping. I did it all the time as a kid. Skydiving sounds like a great idea all the
Yeah.
time. Bungee jumping,
Yeah.
none of this. Driving real fast, none of that stuff bothers me. And it's not like I'm averse to risk because I am averse to risk. I just don't necessarily like if I have trust in my equipment, I know that my safety equipment it works. I've inspected it. Then why would I be afraid of something when I have a ripcord? And that's a strange thing to have as a business owner too, and even like as a tech engineer.
Mm-hmm.
It's led to some interesting things, not necessarily bad things or good things, just interesting things. Trying solutions out that shouldn't work that do work, and next thing you know, you're writing a white paper on data recovery solutions for a three letter. So
Yeah.
it is an interesting tool to have. It's not necessarily a bad thing to not be afraid of
Yeah, I
everything.
mean, well, fear is interesting. Like I'm not afraid of a lot of stuff, but I am afraid if it like recovering something. If I'm brought into something or anything like that, I'm kind of like, it's fine. Only time I get worried. I don't know about afraid, but I get worried, which I mean is a subset of fear technically. I get worried if I'm gonna like lose money or something like that for because I got
Yeah.
guys to feed, I got people that we have to employ, we have to make sure people insurance and all that other stuff because the logical fear is if I don't take care of them, they can't take care of me, right?
Yeah.
Because I to me and to me I got 5 T-shirts. I'll cycle through them. True classic, love those T-shirts, and I'll
Hmm.
cycle through those 5 T-shirts and 3 pairs of jeans, and I'm happy.
Yeah, I mean, I basically wear the same thing, the same hat, because I'm just a creature of habit.
Yeah,
That's
it's
that might
one
actually
less
be
for
more of
me.
an
It's one less thing to
engineer
think about.
thing.
Maybe.
Because once you find something you're comfortable in, you just want to stay. You're comfortable. It's not broken yet, so
Yeah.
fine. You're fine. I mean,
Which
my
I
girl
want
makes
to. Yeah.
fun of me because I'll sew a hole in socks because I like the socks. They're comfortable. I
Yeah.
have other
Which
socks, but I like the ones I wear.
Yeah, which I mean, I do want to say, man, there is a big difference between engineer and architect engineer. I would say,
Yeah.
like I one of the things I learned, especially with as my buddy calls it, the tism, which I love that word. It's just the tism for everything.
Yeah.
Um, God, engineers hated me. I did not realize how much they did not like me because, for example, I played Halo. I think it was Halo 3. You know the level where they have the beach and the mongoose, and you have to like force your way up the hill, and there's a wraith in there, and you fight everybody. And we would play, and we were struggling that day because we had every skull turned on and everything else. And I said, screw that. And I was like, I wonder how far the border on the left side goes. So I took the
Hmm.
mongoose from him, and I said, all right, I'll see you in a minute. And he's like, where are you going? I said, don't worry about that. So I go up this, I drive up the beach the entire way. Nobody sees me. Jump on the back of the wraith, throw off the little bad guy there, and take the wraith and just blow everybody up. And he was so mad at me. That's not how you play the game. That's not what the book says. I'm like, I know, but that was more fun.
Yeah. So, I mean, trying to think what
Well, it's
the
like
differences
it's
in
the way
art.
we play Tarkov, right?
Yeah.
Everybody has a set. This is what everyone does, and I'm like, yeah, that doesn't seem fun. I want to try this. Why? Because
Oh, dude, yeah. Just because a solution is presented doesn't
yeah,
mean it's the only solution. Engineers know that. We always try to find other possible solutions. Maybe one is
yeah,
better. Maybe 20 of them are far worse, but
yeah.
still effective.
Well, so
And
okay, so
architects just say this is I've designed your solution. This is the only solution to
yeah,
this problem that I have also designed for you. And so
yeah.
they tend to get into it.
Well, and I guess I'm Nick put it this way one time. We were sitting down having lunch and we were laughing, and he goes, "You know, Ben," he goes, "You and I are in a different world." I was like, "Well, what do you mean? We're both engineers." He's like, "No, no, 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 no. I am an engineer. You are in a different world." And I was laughing. He's like, "For example, someone says, 'Hey, you need to build a bridge to get across the Grand Canyon.'" And he's like, Nick's like, "I'm gonna look around on the floor and be like, I got some sticks. Will this work?" And you're over here saying, "Well, you know, if we can build a gravity generator and essentially warp gravity and push the Grand Canyon together, we can just walk over it." And he's like, "I don't know. You live in that weird world where it's not just, hey,
Yeah.
let me look around and see what I have. It's, screw it. Let's bend time and space to make this happen."
Yeah, so you're just not looking for a linear solution, and
No,
Nick looks for a linear
no,
solution.
we're
A lot of
looking.
that comes down to brain chemistry too.
Yeah.
Like neither answer is wrong.
No, no,
That's
it's
the
it's
thing.
not. It's not. And and I laugh because I call it the always the non-Euclidean answer.
Hmm.
The non-Euclidean
Yeah.
geometry answer, or the and in any case though. But yeah, it just going back to the fear. I look at, like, for example, and I don't know if these are just people that I always think of Malcolm from Jurassic Park. No one ever asked if we should, because
Yeah.
everyone only asked if we could. And you have, hopefully I'm saying this right, Professor Yosef Bengio, from he's feeling lost over his life work as a so-called. I mean, the BBC's calling the Godfather of artificial intelligence. And he's saying that a lot of this work, and he's calling for AI regulations. And he's saying that the so-called three godfathers of AI know the pioneering work in the field, but they're voicing concerns about direction and speed and its development, and essentially it's become an unhinged dragon that has
Hmm.
been just let out into the open.
I mean, it's kind of what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah,
We need, I don't know, regulation is right because I don't want
we
governments to
need
step in and
Asimov
regulate
laws.
something.
We need
Yeah, like
Asimov.
some version of that for AI. Like the thing is if we don't put it in place now, someone will just make their own, and that will
Yeah,
become whoever sets the precedent
yeah,
for the lifetime of the product. I mean, even with robotics, Asimov's a science fiction author,
yeah.
and yet we all still,
Well, he
to
was
this
also
day, even Boston Dynamics,
he was also a mathematician as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
but he wasn't making robots.
No, no,
He was a
no.
sci-fi author. At the end of the day, he was a mathematician as well, but his founding principles of robotics were based on some research into some other humanist theologies and just some realities of the situation. You can see the fallacies of things like bias in mankind, and where you could, without certain things put in place, certain kinds of rules for execution in place, it could go really badly really quickly. And it's the same reason like NATO has rules about what kinds of ammo you can shoot and bombs you
Yeah.
can make. We need to have rules for warfare because unbridled chaos is going to breed a massive amount of destruction.
Well,
And
bad
every
actors.
industry is going to be that.
I
Yeah,
mean,
only
we're in
you
fear of
only need
bad
one bad
actors.
actor.
Yeah, we're in fear of bad actors. Which, by the way, for the people out there, Asimov being writing a lot of science fiction stuff, like the movie Artificial Intelligence or AI with Robin Williams, iRobot, which is a series of books kind of mashed together into one thing. But his three laws of robotics, the first law is a robot may not injure a human being or through interaction allow human being to become harmed. A robot must obey the orders given it by a human being without the exception which it conflicts with the first law. And the third law, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first two laws.
Hmm. I
So
don't know how we would adapt that to AI necessarily because it's not necessarily corporeal, but we
I
need something like that.
well,
I do not want the federal government or the UN or NATO or the EU to come and make regulations. Like,
yeah.
so Altman is talking about how he wants to pull OpenAI out of Europe if they try attempt to regulate, while
Mhm.
simultaneously being in the US screaming for regulation that he himself dictates.
Well, yeah, exactly. He's dictating it.
I don't know how you make that make sense, but he's doing the mental gymnastics to do it. I, we need some rules for it. I mean, we've in our own experiments with AI, we've seen what happens when you give AI a
Yeah.
bunch of tools and just be like, let's just see what happens.
Well, I mean, yeah, self
Some of those
replication.
experiments
Oh,
are drastic. Yeah, that
well,
was a poor mistake on our choice.
that was. Well, that
Just
so
was.
so when I look at the third law though, what scares me about the third law is it can bypass itself and it can say, okay, well, if I need to protect myself, then I need to self-replicate myself, right? I need to put myself into the system or whatever the case is, so I'm always living. So maybe you cross off that third law, but that's some scary news if it's self-replicating or if it comes to a logical decision, the only way to save humanity is to restart humanity.
I mean, that's been the fodder for thousands of books and
Every movie
movies over
known to
the
man,
years.
yeah.
The thing is before we did it with robots, before we did it with AI, humans were making decisions like that. And we
Yeah.
have books and movies about humans doing it because ultimately, this is a pretty meta conversation, but ultimately, man has an inherent amount of failure and an inherent amount of self-serving bias that makes us very susceptible to the wrong kind of decisions for the betterment of others. And a lot of selfish proclivities exist in humans and exist in all walks of it, of our life. And I'm not really sure how we get around that. And the reason the three laws of robotics work is they're simple, they're
Mm-hmm.
self-contained, and they're self-referential for purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how we do that with AI because the whole point of AI is to teach it new things. So it needs to be able to learn similar to a human. Humans are always learn well.
Well,
Most
yeah,
of us are always learning. Some of us just decide we're done learning.
yeah.
You keep your mind fresh. One of the cool pieces of emerging research I'm seeing is virtualizing a human brain or a human
Mm-hmm.
personality. The woman that made Replica AI, which is was originally like a social chat bot
Mm-hmm.
that became a social dating sim that then got shut down because they were like having people make AI girlfriends and boyfriends, charging them like $1,000 to keep them. And even like using AI software like generate nudes and a bunch of other odd stuff. So they would be like actual relationships. Um, that's a terrifying aspect of this technology. Like I see the potential in taking great minds and positive thinkers and virtualizing their personality and letting them live on in infamy and in forever because they're useful to society. But I see the penchant for widespread abuse of that and how scary it can be because there's also nothing stopping you from virtualizing a living person and
Now,
impersonating them.
I'm
And we
gonna
have issues with deep fakes, and this
yeah,
is even worse.
which I'm gonna use that to segue into another emulation here. Nintendo emulation. So that's been a thing for years. If you guys are old school, um, do you remember the P2P Pete's graphics emulator and all that other stuff, or those old ones?
Hmm.
Obviously, disclaimer: you have to own if you legally want to emulate a game, you need to own a copy of it. That's just you have to have
Hmm.
own a copy of it. You got to have a physical copy of it. But I digress for this moment. XDA developers just came out with an article. Yuzu officially comes out with the Nintendo Switch emulator for Android. Uh, that's very interesting because can you imagine running Nintendo Switch on a Stream Deck?
I mean, yeah, or on like a Fold or something that's way more powerful than a
Yeah.
Switch as it is now.
Yeah, because I
Hell,
believe.
just running it on your PC in like
Yeah.
BlueStacks or something. Let me use my giant GPU to
Yeah,
run
so
Zelda or whatever.
Yuzu will say that it needs the ARM, it needs the Snapdragon 860 fix 860 fix. Oh my gosh, 865 or newer
Sure.
Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 minimum preferred, but along with 8 gigs of RAM. So you will need a minimum 8
Yeah.
gigs of RAM for that, which is just kind of crazy. You'll need Android 11 to be able to run it. Maybe the Exynos 2200 should be able to work with it, but they're saying that they're getting pretty good frame rates. So the like Super Mario World 3D, they're getting for like on a Galaxy 20, Galaxy S20,
Hmm.
they're getting 30 frames per second. On a Galaxy S23, they're getting 60 frames per second. Which I mean, you're not going to get more than 60 frames anyways. On
Yeah, because
what's
it's
the Switch running
limited.
right now? Is it 30? What?
The screen can do 90. I think they're all soft limited to
Yeah,
60.
they're all soft
It's
limited
on the game.
anyways.
The chip that's in this, I mean, the Switch is what, 3 years old, I think, right now, and the chip that's in it is basically like like right in between like an Xbox 360 and an Xbox
Yeah,
One, or maybe a One and One S.
yeah,
So it really isn't very powerful. Plus, it's resolution limited. It's only like 720p. It's very resolution limited.
yeah.
The Switch is a really cool concept for Nintendo, and
Mm-hmm.
it took what they were trying to make the Wii U and they made it into the Switch, which
Mm-hmm.
is better in every possible way than what the Wii U did. But
Well, Wii U is like Windows Vista. It was a jumper platform.
yep,
It
yeah,
was a
it was
jumper platform.
required to show a point,
Yeah.
and they do. To be fair, Nintendo does need to probably replace that hardware. But the thing about the emulator is that you know, Nintendo is an incredibly litigious company. There's
Really?
no
Not
way
kidding.
that, oh my
Yeah.
God, yeah, I know,
Yeah.
right? There's no way this lasts longer than, I don't know, man, maybe a couple of months in the wild before they get sued like everyone
Well,
else
yeah. I
does.
mean, they're gonna get sued or whatever the case, or they're gonna claim, "Hey, we're just an emulator," and anybody that's on them, kind of, so to speak. Like, "Hey, we make it. If they fire it, it's your fault."
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. This might be a way to push Nintendo to actually do something different with the Switch. An OLED screen is not. I mean, it's an upgrade, but it's not. It's not an upgrade, right?
Yeah.
With the fact that we can't have a dock and get 4K, that or even 1080 60. Because right now,
Yeah,
what's
because
what?
it's upscaled right now.
Yeah,
It upscales to 1080.
yeah. Let's see. What's the native resolution on that? Yeah, so the native resolution technically it can reach up to 1080p or
Yeah.
720p, but I mean it's upscaled. It's not really anything, but I mean it's just the ARM technology is coming out that's newer. It's getting better. I mean look at the Oculus Quest 2.
Yeah.
It was a
Or
great
the three
upgrade.
that's coming out. And we get the Quest 3 in a couple of weeks.
Oh, does it
The new
already?
app, yeah, the
Or
new
the
Apple
which
hardware
okay,
is
was
nutty.
the Quest Pro a big upgrade over the Quest 2?
Yeah, it's a
How is
huge
it
upgrade.
like so because I
So
noticed
it hasn't.
there wasn't a resolution difference, but I know there's a power difference.
So it's a faster processor. The big
Okay.
thing is the RAM,
Okay.
uh, and the screen type. So no, there's not a resolution change. But the reality is, the way the lenses work, on like the Quest 2, you only see like something smaller than my pinky nail
Hmm.
anyway, and the lens blows it out. So you don't. The resolution isn't as big of a deal as the refresh rate. And so what the Quest Pro does is they have a new kind of screen, number one, the pancake lenses, number two,
Hmm.
for better clarity, a better processor, but the extra RAM is a huge deal. Plus moving all of the controller tracking and processing onto the controllers
Yeah.
frees up. So like right now to track the controllers
Hmm.
on the Quest, like 10 to 15% CPU,
Oh
which
wow,
is doesn't
that's a
it's
lot.
a small number, but it's a lot. Like me and you understand in context,
Yeah.
10% extra cycles could be 4 to 5 FPS, which in the case of VR is really important
Yeah.
because when the refresh rate drops below like even 70, people get motion sickness. I mean, you get motion sickness from VR,
Hmm.
like when you're turning and stuff like that, and when you do smooth turning. And that's because the frame rates drop. Well,
Yeah.
imagine you could get 90 to 120 by moving tracking off a slightly higher processor and more RAM, because it also uses like a half a gig of RAM, a gig of RAM to do like hand tracking, controller positioning. All that stuff is now moved to dedicated processors on the
Yeah.
controllers themselves. So what they're doing now is the Quest 2 reads the controller input and the Quest 2 says, "Oh, this is where it is. I'm positioning it here." Versus on the Pro and the 3 where the controllers say, "Here I am." And then all the Quest has to do is now just receive the positional data.
Got it.
So
Okay.
it really does make a big difference in performance, and it makes a big difference in what kind of headroom you have for extra features or to do all kinds of other stuff for multitasking and to punch the clarity up. So the way Foveat rendering works right now, we have a really, really, really tight focus area that's clear, and
Mhm.
everything else has to be blurry because we just don't have the cycles to do it.
Yeah.
On the Pro and on the 3, that area gets to be a lot bigger. So just because the screens aren't higher resolution doesn't mean they aren't in fact clearer, because they are. Like the human's natural body is to use our eyes to look around, not our
Yeah.
entire head. And with the way current VR is outside of the Pro and like the Vario and stuff that has eye tracking, that little dot that's clear is just in a very specific God point, and if it's not there, you just can't. It just doesn't look as good. And there's just some people that cannot see it. The other thing too is with the way the 3 and the Pro work, you don't need your glasses anymore because they have built-in diopters, so which is a big deal for people with sight issues. Right now, you for the most part just get like prescription lens inserts. You put your lenses over the lenses that are there, which is yet a whole other issue with focus and clarity and everything
Yeah.
else. And
Yeah.
it's
Like,
just it's a much better option
well,
and
that's
it's
good
much faster.
because I obviously so I use it with my well, I use it with my kiddo because she's got strabismus, right? And she has tracking issues, so we use it with her. I mean, she plays hockey, which helps her with the tracking and a lot of stuff like that. But one of the eye place that we go to, the neuro eye therapy, helped her get to like a 20/20 vision with her glasses because it's pretty bad. She's like +3 and +2.7 or something like that. Um, they really helped though, and they said, "Hey, use the virtual reality. It's going to help with the tracking, the movement, and
Mhm.
everything else with that."
I would definitely say a Pro would probably be the better purchase versus a 3, because the 3 doesn't have active eye tracking. They removed
Yeah.
it for cost saving measures, but the Pro has it, so it can actually dynamically change
Yeah.
based on where your pupil is looking, where your focal
Yeah.
zone is, and that might actually help. There's software too that uses eye tracking headsets to correct even like astigmatism and stuff. It's
Yeah.
weird how it works. Remember, like back in the day, someone would have like a severe astigmatism or something. They just wear an eye patch for a while to relax the eye and let the muscles naturally move to where they were supposed to.
Yeah.
There's training things for that in VR for certain headsets. HTC has one that does it. Vario has one that does it. Pimax has one that does it, but I wouldn't buy a Pimax if I could avoid it. And then the Quest Pro
Yeah.
3, they all
Which,
have it
I
built
mean,
in.
don't get me wrong, like I've been a big VR fan just in general. There are a lot of games I can play, but like Zero Caliber, any of those other ones where you got to go run out there and stuff like that. Like let's see I had the Vive, the HTC, or I not the Vive, but oh, which is the one that Steam made again? What was that called?
The Index.
Yeah, so I have the Index.
Valve Index.
I had the Rift S, the Index, and the Quest 2. So, which I mean, would that help if you ended up plugging the Quest 2 into a computer because it has a link cable to be able to use the GPU on the computer?
It does help, but not much. So a properly set up AirLink or virtual desktop is probably going to be faster than the cable, because the cable, like, so Link is designed to run on 400 megabit, which just isn't much. It tops at like 90 hertz.
Hmm.
But if your machine can't run a game at 180 to 200 FPS, you're going to have a terrible time in VR
Yeah,
because you're running two screens. That's the other reason. Like, so one of the things that makes Apple's upcoming headset so cool, it's got a custom M2 chip, which the M2 chip is bonkers. I don't care for a lot of things Apple does, but their M series chips in the ARM world are absolutely nutty. And the fact that they're running 12 cameras, two 4K displays, so it's 4K per eye off the M2, and the controllers have like custom M1
hmm,
SoCs built in them. So they're doing the same thing that Meta did and moving tracking for the controllers onto processing units on the controllers. Yes, it makes them more expensive, but it means they won't lose tracking, they won't lose accuracy. and you just take all that burden off the headset.
Yeah.
It's it's
Well,
really, really, really neat what they're
well,
doing.
I'm really excited to be just in general, especially with. I mean, right now, obviously, our biggest limitation is Qualcomm. Qualcomm basically being the main producer of ARM chips for any forward technology.
Yeah.
But
Well, s- I don't know. Samsung has got.
no, Samsung has some good stuff out there. I mean, if
Well,
if
the
if
thing
you
is,
want
we just don't get it here in the U.S. Like
no,
Exynos is not produced here. MediaTek is another.
yeah,
They're not. We at here in the U.S. we look at MediaTek as a lower brand because we just
yeah,
do. The reality of it is, it's they have some fantastic hardware that no one buys because it's incredibly expensive, but it's super, super, super powerful. And Exynos has some stuff on the same performance level as Apple's M series of chips because Samsung designed them for Apple.
yeah,
So technically, they have chips that can do the same thing that Apple's can do.
yeah,
What they don't have, though, is the software stack to do what Apple does. Apple has one thing to optimize for:
yep,
their hardware.
yep.
Even like their Intel stuff, they have like one generation of CPU, one main board, one MOSFET, one VRM, one all that stuff. And so it allows them to make super, super tightly integrated code. I don't know that it's I don't know that it's Qualcomm limiting us because they have chips that will compete.
Yeah.
It's the software stack.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know, the thing that
maybe
gives us our beautiful gift of
yeah.
agnostic
I mean,
deployments.
obviously they
hurts
won't.
us.
Like, they're not going to do that, especially with our history with Qualcomm. Just in
Yeah.
general. But knowing them and what they're doing. But I
But
would.
that new partnership between Samsung, Meta, and Qualcomm is probably going to produce like the next XR series of chip, like the 3 is what they're coming out with,
Yeah,
is supposed to be able to do what Apple's M2 is doing in a
yeah.
headset. It's supposed to
Which
run
is
like
which, by the
10 or 12
way, I don't know
cameras.
if people know, but Samsung chips are phenomenal in the sense that we see them obviously in Samsung phones and other places like that, or you see them made, but also more importantly, the chips that they make for servers, like hands down, are some of the best out there. We like when we buy sets for servers, we're typically looking for specific brands. Like Samsung server ECC memory is just phenomenal, especially when
Hmm.
you're buying the correct sets. And I mean, that's just kind of the go-to, especially if you are upgrading or looking or anything else. Which, by the way, when you guys build servers, try to buy it in the same batches. Like, I know it's a waste of
Yeah.
money to have different things, or if you have your home lab, it's okay. But if you want something in production, get the same chipset memory, because you know what's going to go bad, you know what's going to be good. It kind of helps function. There's little minor idiosyncrasy. I mean, even bit flip of when it was made with the cosmic rays going through the facility at the time.
Which sounds like science fiction, but is in fact true.
Yeah.
You know, most consumers think Samsung, they make phones, TVs, and appliances. The reality is Samsung is the manufacturer for like 40 or 50% of
Yep.
the devices of the world. Like they make the memory, the storage, the
Yep.
CPUs, the MOSFETs, all kinds of stuff. They make the displays that go into half the TVs on the market that aren't even branded theirs. It's really amazing what they produce that we all just think they're the same half a dozen end user stuff. Hell, Samsung makes cars in Korea. And
Yes.
what they're capable of doing, especially with their partnership with TSMC, which is the actual manufacturer of a lot of their stuff,
Mm.
is they're like the only company that can compete with Apple because they're the only one with end-to-end manufacturing. And for the longest time, Intel made the CPUs and Samsung made almost everything else that went into an Apple product, like their memory controllers, their storage units, some of their like smaller MCIs, all that stuff was made by Samsung for the longest time, and then produced in factories with TSMC or
Yeah.
Foxconn. And
Which, I mean, we will start being able to get ahead, because it looks like, according to, this is, I don't know, this came out maybe a month or two ago. Reuters is talking about how TSMC approves capital injection of 3.5 billion to their Arizona facility. So now they're expecting production for their 5 nanometer technology, is supposed to start in 2024, next year.
which is insane to me.
Yeah.
The fact that we're getting that kind of production back when so Intel used to be in New Mexico. They still are,
Hmm.
but they don't do as much
Yeah.
manufacturing. Most of it's done in Israel now
Yeah.
because you need
Well,
a
they're in Costa Rica as well.
yeah, you need like a perfect plot of land for certain types of things
Mm-hmm.
because the minute vibrations 200 miles below in the Earth's core can affect the quality of your silicon fab. And there's only a few places in the world that can do it. The fact that we're getting 5 nanometer manufacturing in the US is just, it's genuinely stunning to me
Oh
in a
yeah.
good way. It's required. If we can make our own chips here, our reliance on China effectively goes away outside of like some raw materials because China
Yeah.
controls a lot of the raw materials. But
Mhm.
it's a huge deal. I mean, you got Foxconn with a plant out in Texas
Yep. Well, yeah.
over by
TI reopened 3 plants as
mhm,
well.
yep. It's really, it's what we're going to be able to do domestically is about to be really cool because right now when you order something, if you're doing R&D, we don't have a lot of chip level manufacturing in the US. We have a couple of companies that do some really small batches, but like Meta's had to spin up entire divisions and buy other small companies just to be able to do their prototyping,
Yeah.
and it makes the cost significantly more expensive and the time significantly more expensive. If we can pull up some of these fab plants here, we'll be able to rapidly iterate on the technology that we have and blow the competition out of the water. We have the talent here. We just don't have the capability of making it here. And between the Foxconn lab, the GTAT lab, the display lab that's in the one that Dan's brother sold to
Yeah. Yeah.
Apple down there, the TI facilities and the TSMC facilities, there's nothing we wouldn't be able to make from
Yeah.
GPUs to memory controllers to storage to CPUs. And that is huge deal. It's going to give
Yeah.
us a rebirth probably by late 2025 in how tech is iterated on in America.
Yeah.
Because all of it has to go to Canada or it has to go to China for the most part now.
Yeah. I mean, that'll be a plus for us. That'll be like I'm a firm believer that we are mimicking the last 100 years, basically. So when you look at the
Mhm.
time of the Industrial Revolution, essentially of how fast we changed with the assembly line, with new tech and everything else, it very mimically it gets very close to it. Minus a all out World War III or something like that happening. But we
Yeah.
seem to be kind of on that scale of bringing manufacturing, at least for the vital things of technology, back out over here. Which, I mean, it gets rid of the whole on-demand type manufacturing type of service, essentially, where you're only ordering on demand as you needed, as opposed to having stockpiles here and there, which is essentially what the federal government during COVID was saying. Like, oh my gosh, we screwed ourselves in for the, oh my gosh, what's that supply and demand term? It's not, is it on demand manufacture, on demand supply, first in
I don't
first
know.
out or
I
something
just,
like that? I don't remember, but in any case, it's the
all of
whole
those are accurate.
yeah,
So,
but the whole idea is everyone holds our stuff everywhere else for us, and we just order as
mhm.
needed, as opposed to at least having some stockpiles here and there, and we having a balanced system, which kind of will help our economy crash a little bit less during those times of like COVID again. So,
Well, and it's kind of like how the point of the strategic reserve, anyway, we use it as like a leasing system, but it's different.
yeah,
The goal is to have a domestic supply of like 90 days, right? A
yeah,
full need. And right now in the US, depending on what it is, and for the
it's
bulk
like
majority of things,
15
we don't.
days. Yeah, I think it's like
Yeah,
10 to
like
15
it's,
days.
yeah, you can't even get a boat from most of these countries that store our stuff in the amount of time.
Yeah,
So like when we had the COVID issues in 2020, yeah, it showed really, really, really quickly how screwed we were because we have just been offshoring manufacturing, storage, and all that stuff for decades now.
hmm
And a lot of people in the tech industry, we've been complaining about it for a really long time. I mean, at least 25, ever since I've been, it's 25 years we've been complaining about some of this.
yeah,
And it got really, really, really bad around 2011, 2010, where nobody held anything.
yeah,
And we were using our ports as long-term warehouses for the longest time, because they didn't want to pay import taxes, or so they just left it sitting there it's just, it's
yeah.
its own thing.
Well, speaking
Um,
of manufacturing, which I'm going to segue here again, NVIDIA. So Linus put out a video which was phenomenal. He went over to the latest showcase. Man, we missed that conference. But essentially, NVIDIA came out and started talking about their new NVIDIA Grace CPU.
mhm.
It's a cool idea. It's a dual CPU, so they're using it's kind of an all-in-one set. You have all of your RAM that's soldered on. So I think it's like 96 gigs of RAM per
Yeah.
socket. And you have your Grace CPU, which is I think it's 72 cores, and then you have your
The
Hopper
CUDA stuff.
GPU that's
Mm-hmm.
connected to it with which I think I have the tech here somewhere. Which you have the Grace Hopper next to it as well, which I got the stuff over here, which is just batshit insane. You and Gigabyte worked with them to be able to throw four of those into a server, so you're getting 72 ARM Neoverse V2 cores on there, and you're getting four of those on top of the GPUs that's able to handle it, and they're using NVLink to be able to talk to each other. So
Mm-hmm.
they have direct access to RAM, direct access to each other, and direct access to everything else. Where the communication between the Hopper and the GPU through the NVLink is 900 gigabytes, not bits, 900
Mm-hmm.
gigabytes per second.
Yeah.
And the GPU itself has it has 96 gigs of RAM on the GPU with the HBM3, and that transfer rate on that is 4 terabytes per second.
Yeah, it's absolutely nutty.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like they're trying to make basically like blade servers for supercomputers, which
yeah,
is like as it stands right now, they're still really big. Like they've come down. They're not like warehouses anymore, but they're still pretty dense and pretty big.
yeah.
This is a huge deal. Um,
I mean, it's
with
huge, and
what they're especially for their price point, the
well,
kind of computing that you're going to be able to do, like it's grid scale computing in something roughly the size of like a mini fridge
well,
versus
yeah.
a full size fridge. It's crazy.
Yo, it's. I mean, obviously, it's still expensive because I know some of their cards that are equivalent that they're pushing out separate are like 100 grand still. But for data center application, this is nutty, especially with AI development. Being able to, so we actually were talking about this yesterday. Is ARM the way we go? Like if we're writing AI code, are we writing for x86 or are we writing it for ARM essentially? You know,
Yeah, well, we want the interface to be like the UI piece, if you will, like that side of the interface
little
needs to be
transversal.
agnostic,
Yeah,
but AI dedicated AI chips are, like the Tensor cores and stuff that are
yeah,
what's in the NVIDIA stuff. And the reason we're kind of harping on NVIDIA is they're the one that's leading the pack in this
yeah.
particular space. They have been for a while, but they have dedicated basically like AI co-processors
Yeah.
built into their GPUs now. And yeah, we're gonna have to optimize for it and design
Yeah,
for it because it's the
and
market prevalence. That's the
yeah, I
thing
mean
is you got where the market
it's
prevalence
a
is.
thing of beauty, like what they built. I mean, it's beautiful that everything's built onto it, and even the way that they wrote the links together.
Hmm.
Obviously, with it being soldered onto the same board, the access to the memory is just insane. Well,
Yeah,
access
isn't
to
it
the
like
system is insane.
LPDDR5 or something? I think it's like
It's
ECC LPDDR5. Yeah, it is
it's the
DDR5X.
DDR5, the 5X.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
which is
LPDDR5X, which is just nutty on the
bonkers
front end.
fast.
Which guys don't get it confused. There is DDR6 and DDR6X. That is fast. This LPDDR5X
Yeah,
is
that's
made
entirely
completely
different kind of
different.
memory.
Yeah,
Yeah,
completely
you don't throw
architected
that in.
different. Yeah,
I wouldn't put that in like a home computer.
I mean, but
You
they're talking.
could if you wanted to
Yeah,
spend the money, but I don't know that I would be doing
I mean,
that. GPUs come with that kind
yeah,
of memory.
but it's crazy. They're calling it the Grace Hopper Super Chip, and it delivers
Hmm.
900 gigabytes per second of total bandwidth, which is 7 times faster than the PCI lanes for Gen 5, which is just
Yeah,
insane. Because I think Gen 5 is what 96 gigabytes per second, or I'm sorry,
something like
200,
that.
200
Yeah,
because it's 5 times.
yeah.
So it's like 180 something like that. It's just ridiculous, and it has. So each one of those, by the way, each CPU is running 480 gigabytes of that LP 86, and then the Hopper's got 96 gigabytes of their
Yeah.
HBM3 RAM on there.
Yeah, I know like there's in the NVIDIA system is like the DGX pod.
Yeah.
I think that's what it's called. And it's like a 5U rack and you just it's just full of that stuff. It
Oh,
is
oh, get this, get this.
bonkers. Like
This is
$5 million buys you what $70 million bought you 3 years
Oh
ago.
yeah, so get
Literally.
this.
Like
It's like
it's crazy.
combined with the NVIDIA NVLink system, all GPU threads running up to 256 NVLink connected GPUs can access up to 150 terabytes of memory at high
Hmm.
bandwidth. Holy crap!
That's across the whole pod, but yeah, it's
But still, Holy crap, 150 terabytes. I mean, you could literally load, oh my gosh, like so Linus was talking about how they could load, the NASA image that's like just it's a terabyte to be able
Yeah.
to look at it. You can load up two of those and still have 148 terabytes of memory left over and
Hmm.
loaded it up all in RAM.
Hmm.
Not off of NVMe's, not off anything else, loading it all up in RAM, which is great for because you need all of that for AI. You need all of that for the
Yeah.
processing.
When we start looking at, we kind of covered a little bit of this last week,
Yeah.
like these little microgrids and like micro installations of like
Yeah.
AI endpoint nodes. This is the kind of thing with it that those would talk to, because NVIDIA also makes an endpoint product that's
Yeah.
got, like a couple of dozen tensor cores in it, and it works really well. And we had talked about making that like something that's deployable at the site for
Yeah.
a bunch of like the localized stuff, and being able to bolt all this stuff in. Like they have an end-to-end product suite for not just AI development, but for the purposes of conversation, AI development, and really
Yeah.
nobody else does. Intel has a somewhat competing product. AMD isn't even playing in the same sandbox.
Yep.
And there's some other companies that have like dedicated hardware
Yeah.
specific for this. But NVIDIA is like really the biggest player that's putting
Yeah.
their real research and development, real money into this.
Well, they bought out Mellanox. I mean, for
Mm-hmm.
anybody doesn't know, so you Mellanox, Brocade, Intel, Broadcom are the main players for networking on the back end, right? You're going to see
Mm-hmm.
normally Broadcom on regular servers. You're going to see Mellanox on chassis where you're having the big like slice U minutes. You're going to have obviously Juniper switches and everything else. But
Well,
buying
Mellanox is
Mellanox,
really like anymore. They're more like storage and high end data
yes,
center, like
high-end
carrier grade
fabric, yeah,
solutions than
high-end fabric.
yeah
So
than
they
like
so
an
their
Intel.
their 100 gig up to 400 gigabit per second cards though what they did was is they bought out the Mellanox for that and then they took some of their tensor cores essentially and put it onto the
Mm-hmm.
the the NIC itself so it can offload a lot of that processing, a lot of that filtered file access, everything else on there. It's kind of like if any of you guys have TrueNAS, right? If you're building a TrueNAS at home, you can have a slog essentially, or you can have or L2 arc essentially, and you usually want a PLP, which stands for power loss protection on your L2 arc because you can basically you're trying to using it or with an Optane as a fast access memory to be able to do everything. And what essentially NVIDIA did was they moved that fast access memory instead of having it on the system itself and bogging it down. It's actually running that fast access memory for the access packets coming in and out on the network card itself to kind of hold it, then move it over.
Yeah, when we first started doing network like scale network attached storage, you could run iSCSI as a protocol,
Mm-hmm.
not a chip.
Yep.
But they would have like iSCSI cards and FCOE cards
Yeah.
because they take all of the offload for the protocol side that isn't storage on a dedicated chip, and it makes it so much faster. What Mellanox did is they gave us InfiniBand,
Yep. Oh my
which
gosh, InfiniBand.
considering what it ran over was crazy. It's still crazy. To be fair, like,
Yeah.
InfiniBand is still a thing. It's incredibly
It
fast.
is. It is.
NVIDIA buying that is really what allowed them to buying Mellanox. One gave them a new revenue stream, so new customer base, but also the ability to run incredibly fast networking because they already had the designs for the chips that handle all the offload.
Yeah.
You
Which,
know,
which, by the way, Amazon bought a crap ton of their stuff. Is working in conjunction with them because I think the idea for Amazon they were saying is they want to be able to add those cards in and then resell the hours on those cards, saying, "Hey, if you want to lower
yeah.
that, you can rent out this card to run over."
Hmm. Yeah, OVH does something similar to that with their PNet product, but yeah, it's I don't know, man. Between InfiniBand and so Intel's got OmniBand, it's like their or OmniPath, it's like their version of InfiniBand that works really well. There just aren't a lot of long or large providers that really do this that are at the kind of scale they are. It's really crazy to me. That was a great purchase for Nvidia,
Oh
honestly,
God, yeah, that
because
was.
they didn't have a competing product in that space. They
I
just
mean, that was
didn't.
that was a Microsoft Activision buyout. Which, by the way, did you see that South Korea approved the buyout for Activision?
No, I didn't realize. I thought it was still locked up.
No, the so I believe it was approved by Activision. Activision was approved in South Korea and a couple other places, so it's gaining feet. But yeah, no, I mean that's what that reminds me. It's just such a powerhouse of a deal.
Hmm.
Such a power.
It's
I mean, yeah,
disruptive to the space. I mean, they brought that Mellanox purchase is what has allowed NVIDIA to put their new DGX pods out, because without it, there's no way for them to get the kind of traffic they need to. And so the thing that makes InfiniBand really, really, really cool is the latency and the
yes,
sensitivity to latency, how it irons that stuff out. When you're looking at like AI applications and HPC applications, latency is a killer, and it can change your results dramatically when you're
mm-hmm,
training.
mm-hmm,
And buying this allowed them to make the products that they're making now. Otherwise, they would be licensing it anyway.
yeah.
OmniPath is good. It's not. It just doesn't run as fast as InfiniBand does, because Mellanox came out with it first, and so they had like a year and a half on Intel. I want to say that most of the deployed scale like fabric networks are based on InfiniBand anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Well, most new
No,
ones
okay.
anyway.
Well, I mean, no, no, they're not. Like, so if you're getting like an HP Nimble, I know. Well, NetApp, I believe, is InfiniBand for their back end still.
Hmm.
Um, the old like, I don't know, man. Since Dell kind of merged with EMC, they've been kind of switching around because EMC, Dell, Power Vault, Compellent were all well. No, Compellent got away from InfiniBand
Yeah.
pretty early. But I remember working a lot with those InfiniBands. Also, the hell, even the internal RAID arrays on a lot of the HP, like all of the HP compliance servers and other stuff like that,
Hmm.
all InfiniBand.
Hmm. Yeah, like newer installations, because it's so
You're seeing
cheap
it
for what
less now,
you
yeah,
get.
but yeah,
But it's got several different versions.
yeah.
It's been kind of it's harder to tell since the acquisition how many are going in, but I know that like we still were putting them in
Yeah.
at large scale, even not that long ago. It really depends
I
on what
mean,
you're
the,
trying
the,
to
the
do.
tech has
But it's
changed so much. We did a we did a 500 terabyte install 4 years ago, or 5 years ago. Six. Oh my gosh, what is it? It's 2023, so 2017, so about 6 years ago, and that costs, I don't know, that costs somewhere around 500,000 or something like that. And now we're looking at another 500 terabyte one, and it was like 100K, and it's all
yeah,
flash, all
it's so
flash.
much cheaper now than it
Like,
used to be.
well, like we were running spinning disks, and we were running cache arrays and flash and all this other stuff, kind of get what we can. Like even the compellent systems that we'd throw up there, we'd run tiered storage. Essentially, everything would
Hmm.
run on flash, and then if it wasn't accessed within 72 hours or 5 days or whatever, we'd
Yeah, it
push it
would
down to
roll
lower tier.
down.
Yeah, roll it down. But now it's just like we're getting ready to build a flash tiered system. It's 60 terabytes. It's not a large one for. I mean, so I'm sure people are screaming at the screen. 60 terabytes of all flash, but theoretically, I mean, it's really not a lot of space these days. But it's great for some of the smaller businesses that we deal with. And I think it was 45,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
100%
The,
flash,
the
and
real
that
limitation on all that is your network too.
yeah,
The
and
array itself that you're building will go
yeah.
way faster than we let it,
Oh
which
yeah,
is gated by the
which
by the
by the
camera.
way, since I mean Optane is Intel said they're killing off their Optane division basically, which kind of sucks. But we ended up putting Samsung PM3s in there to act as it as because it's all the SLC fast
Hmm.
access NVMe type flash, and we're running it, and they both have power loss protection, which is great. So we're running I think we're running two 3.84 terabyte cards. So for the
Yeah.
for so one of them is for the slog, one of them is for the L2 arc, which I'm still scared, by the way, side note, for on TrueNAS to run their indexing drive. So what I've been reading is if you can run it in a mirror, but if you lose that index drive, that's two drives.
Oh yeah.
You're
If you lose it,
done.
you're hosed. You
You're
have to have it back.
done. Now the
Yeah, you have
speed
to
is
have it back.
phenomenal. Like if it was a scratch disk, it's phenomenal. That's what I'm thinking. If I was running as a scratch disk, for people to scrub and move stuff on, where if we lose it, it's no big deal. I would 100% throw the indexing in there, but man, that scares me. If you have a 24 base system or a 36 base system or even a 72 base system, you're thinking redundancy, built speed, all that other stuff, and it's almost kind of like maybe I'll just
I
put a
mean,
bunch of
I would run hot spares. But the thing is, if you're not running any spinning rust,
no, it's all
you don't need
flash.
to offload it. If it's all flash, I don't know what kind of performance increase you're going to get because you're still limited ultimately by the cable and the interface at the endpoint, which for
You
most
are. I mean,
Office PCs,
no
it's
one's
what
gonna.
gigs. So
No, the only reason I would even have it is if you're running massive databases with deep queue depths, right?
yeah,
So a lot of people don't talk about that. I've heard Linus maybe talk about queue depth. I think he talked about one of his other ones before, and server the home and a couple other people. But queue depth is important when you're running those databases. Like, I mean, you're running 32 queue depth with spinning rest, right? You're
hmm
running SSDs are I think 125 or something like that is what like VMware is going to limit it at. But if
yeah,
you're running an
yeah,
Optane, you're running at 1024 queue depth to be able to handle
yep,
all of basically all the read write transactions going back and forth with your with 500 to a million IOPS both on read write for 4K blocks.
yeah.
So
We
I'm
trying to think of like a use case for that remote index thing where it's in its own
honestly, a
pool.
video scratch disc. If you were
Yeah,
if I think if you're a YouTuber and you had multiple people come in there, which by the way, any big YouTubers, if you want to call us, we'll help you out with that too. If Linus is too busy, right? But essentially, you need a scratch disc. If you got multiple editors running off of something, I mean, we run into this with some of the marketing agencies we work with. I think where they're running huge videos and other stuff like that, I think a scratch disc that's all flash with the index, especially with the fingerprinting and everything else on it, I think that might be a good idea for it to be able to access the data quickly and then when they're done, move it off. Because which by the way, I hope most people don't know this. Adobe is not meant to be edited over a network. You're supposed to drag it down, edit it, and then
yeah.
drag it back up. They will not support you unless you're that special guy, which is so funny. I met a guy, he argued with me. He was like, "Oh, you don't know me." He's like, "I went to the special Adobe Summit with 15 people where they teach you how to blah, blah, blah." I'm like, "Bro, it's all the same." And they teach you how to build this custom SCSI array for this. I was like, "You mean direct block storage to your computer?" When I was like, what's different about that, right?"
Yeah.
you know,
So
and
when I built that array for the client in Dallas, the 120 terabytes,
yeah,
I needed people to be able to do like real-time 4K scrubbing over the wire between like 5 floors.
yeah.
And so we ran 10 gig between floors and we got it to work.
Well,
It's really finicky though. Like you
yeah,
really need to just proxy all that out to like smaller localized storage batches and then queue them up and
yeah.
just it's just
Which
better.
I do want to clarify, people. It's you don't want to you don't want to run edits over SMB is essentially what they're saying. So what Adobe will have you do is they'll have you run a fabric to your computer to whatever storage array, and what they typically say is, hey, add that iSCSI block so you can attach that storage directly through an iSCSI controller on your Windows, so it shows up as a D drive basically on your computer, right? And that's essentially what they're teaching about these different things. So if you have a 100 gig card and you're running it on one of your PCI lanes or whatever the case is, you can run it to that fast storage with the indexing and essentially have everyone look like they have the D drive. And I don't mean like a
Mhm.
networked D drive, an actual D drive show up on
Yeah,
your
it gets
computer.
presented as block
Yeah.
storage, not as like SMB storage. So there's Apple made some changes in APFS that allow for this to work a little bit better. Still not great. That's what we had to do for the client was to support some Apple stuff. It's still it's a mixed bag with performance, and the weirdest thing will affect the quality, even like the distance, unless you're going fiber between floors. This is mainly over copper. If you're going
Yeah.
fiber between floors, fiber's
Which
fine,
fiber? Oh my
but
gosh,
it's just so much more expensive.
fiber. Oh
Most
my gosh,
clients
it's
don't want
expensive, but it has saved my life. We we did a quote as a favor for some audio video stuff. We don't normally do that stuff, but we did it as a favor, and we're gonna end up ripping out all the HDMI and like with the original. I mean, the way to go for when you're running long distance projectors and other stuff like that or anything else is you're gonna run HDMI over Ethernet, right? You're gonna run it over dual Cat
it. Yeah, some
sixes
kind of
or
balance.
whatever, but man, bro, we ran a 100 So I think you can get up to 200 meters, Brooks, or 200 feet. I don't remember which it is. Even if it's 200, no, it's 200 meters or 100 meters, essentially of fiber and still maintain 4K 120, which is
Mm-hmm.
nuts. Which is
As
nuts.
long as it's over Cat 6. Yeah, you can't
Well,
do it
no,
over
no,
fiber
no.
Cat
No, they,
6.
they have a pure fiber cable now you can buy, and we ran a test on it. We ran a 100-foot cable at the office, and we were getting full, no latency, 100-foot fiber, 100-foot 4K 120 hertz.
Oh yeah, over fiber you can do that.
Yeah, so
You
well,
can go
that's
a
what I'm saying.
mile.
So
Well,
we're ripping out
get the
all
right
the.
kind of fiber.
Well, yeah, so we're ordering it from specific vendors that are making the fiber cables that are, true and tested. But we're ripping out, I think there's 5 or 6 HDMI lines that are all copper, and we're going to rip all of those out, and we're running fiber directly to an HDMI matrix switcher to be able to keep up all the speeds. But it's great. No repeaters, no extra costs, and each cable now is only 150 bucks.
Yeah, they're really cheap now.
Yeah, it
And
is
the cool
insane.
thing is that all of the circuitry is just in the port.
Yep.
Like it's come down so much.
Now
You
I,
see
w- I will
something
admit,
like roughly
yeah.
this size. Great.
Yeah, which I tell everybody. I mean, now it fits on something like in the inside of there.
Yeah.
But now I tell everybody, make sure you have extras because if you do get hit by lightning, if you do get hit anything by else, you do have the problem with basically micro EMPs essentially arcing your
Hmm.
system and kind of destroying those little things. So just a reminder, if you guys have any of that, you just be careful. But phenomenal technology. I'm gonna jump over here to kind of our last segment because we're running a little bit of time here, but essentially, man, has anybody been following the Theranos scandal with Elizabeth Holmes?
That whole thing is so weird.
It is nutty. It is crazy. So, all right, back history on Elizabeth Holmes. She was going to Stanford, dropped out, used her tuition money, which I mean, that's a whole nother topic of saying I got tuition money paid for when I was selling candy bars in high school just to go to freaking band camp.
Hmm.
Uh, and essentially use that money to start up this company with a blood testing startup, essentially pitching a revolutionary technology where typically for each test you need a vial, or for each test that you're doing, and essentially vial this big, and essentially it's basically 1 or 2 tests per vial, typically one test per vial. But like if you're getting allergy testing, like I got allergy testing not too long ago, Brooks, and they took 5 vials or something ridiculous like that because I have dermographia. They can't do the test on me because I'd be allergic to everything. So, so basically, she said you can get up to 240 tests from one vial, which was nuts, which was insane because what she ended up doing, what they ended up finding out was she lied about it. And she, by the way, she raised $700 million in investment, like $700 million in investment with no one checking the technology, no one checking anything, just nuts. So, so she goes through this. She gets all of that money and funding, and what she ends up doing is sending off a lot of these places by herself, by the way, with some people helping, but she would take them and send them off to labs to come back. Which, I mean, she was trying to use drops of blood for all these different tests for people to kind of get it going and end up getting found out. I mean, but it was just insane that when they broke the story. So it was John Carrio, it's a twice Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, broke the article in 2015. But catch up today, she is starting her 11-year sentence, and she appealed basically for she was appealing, asking not basically go to jail, and they said tough crap, go to jail
Yeah.
with all
The
of
fact
that.
that she only got 11 years for something that could have ruined so many people's lives, because
Mm-hmm.
the results, that even the results that she got back from certified labs weren't all that great, and sometimes
No.
they were wrong. That's how the whole thing got found out. Is they gave people people found out they had like cancer and all these other terrible things because the numbers were wrong, between the
Yep.
samples getting mixed up to just not having enough material to make a solid test.
Yep.
The crazy thing about this is what has ultimately happened as a result of this is a couple of companies have come in and built a similar machine, not near the same wild claims, but it does do a lot with a small amount of blood. And she basically played herself because now, no matter what, her company is never going to be first to market with a set of products that they effectively pioneered in science fiction, but they still pioneered it. I, when they were, I remember when the stuff was coming out, they raised they had like a $10 billion valuation, I think, at some point with
Not
no
yeah, not
product that
yeah,
no one had ever
9 billion. Yeah.
seen. Yeah, I'm like, there's no way,
Well,
man.
and listen, I'm not a big a person of privilege, but I am I look at this and I go, damn, she went up there. I'm gonna say pretty privileged, right? She went up there, got money, got a $9 billion evaluation. Nobody questioned it. I mean, granted, she was lying basically to all of her employees too, where they literally were chanting
Mhm.
F you," or whatever the
I
case
mean, a
is.
lot
But
of people did not know their product was fake. They
yeah,
didn't.
no,
Like
no, it was
only a few people
crazy.
knew.
But I mean, but there were, it was so bad where when John Carreyrou, and I apologize if I'm saying that wrong, doing it, they also were chanting in reverse, being like they thought he was lying when
Hmm.
he became he basically became an enemy of the company. She turned everybody on them, and it reminds me of the whole SFB with what's his name,
Bankman
Friedman.
Free.
Yeah,
Yeah.
SFB essentially. He just convinced everybody in his position that yeah, we're true, we're honest, this is who, believe everything that we're doing enough where maybe sometimes that was an episode of 30 Rock where it's like, oh my god, I can't believe I've been taking advice from you all my life, you're just an alcoholic with a good voice.
Dude, funny thing about that Elizabeth Holmes chick,
Yeah,
she was like the female Steve Jobs, and
yeah,
she talked like him, walked like him, dressed like him.
yeah,
Even the voice that she used, none of it was real. Like
yeah.
none of her mannerisms real. None of it was real. It was all fake. All for this I'm a rising star, look at me, I'm famous in tech thing. It's so weird to me the level of delusion that you need to have to think that this is gonna be a thing, man.
And is it because of the level of delusion is everything's handed to them? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I want to look up more of her history, but
pretty sure she's like a silver spoon kid, if I remember
I mean, and
correctly.
I mean, you and I both came up from we had to build our legacies from nothing,
Hmm.
right? We had to, and I don't want to say nothing because I'm sure there's people in worse conditions, but I'm gonna say we built our legacies from sleeping literally on the floor with no bed and
Hmm.
parents barely having a home, which is still better than none. I mean, living in apartments and homes or whatever the case is, selling candy bars to go to whatever the case is. So I mean, obviously living in the U.S., we're in a better scenario, but we went from that to kind of where we are now to working on some of the greatest AI tech that we think is going to be coming out with what we're building and what we're doing alongside of some other blockchain tools and other things that we're building. But I mean, I look
Yeah.
at that and it just sometimes, I mean, I get the feelings. These are one of the few feelings I get where I'm like, man, I'm kind of jealous. I struggle with communication, I struggle with social norms and everything else, and you have people like her that walks in that basically knew shit and got all this
Yeah.
money, and we're here, we're like, hey, we got a product that's awesome, and they're like, well, that I applied for a job a while back. I'm not going to say who it is or what happened or anything case with that, or I will say what happened, but they essentially told me, yeah, we don't like your kind, we really don't want you, and we're not happy that you talked to somebody to get the interview, and
Hmm.
essentially told me bye. And then you get people like SFB, like her and other people, and I mean, they know how to play the game. I'm,
I want to say that she got convicted of like lying to investors, not even like customers,
yeah,
not the medical malpractice stuff. I think it was she got
I mean, I think she should have got way more.
absolutely. Well, they were trying for a lot more
Let's see here.
because she
Home.
caused people all kinds of undue stress. Like there was, I remember watching a story about it where they had told some woman that she had cancer, and she went through like planning her late stages of life before a doctor was like, "These numbers don't make a lick of sense. Um, this is none of this is right. Doesn't match any." And that's when they were like, they went and pulled the actual information and found that
Oh
not
wow,
only was
which is crazy. They're making a movie about her life rights too, where they're saying,
yeah Amanda Seyfried or something,
yeah,
didn't
Amanda
she?
Seyfried and Jennifer Lawrence. Oh, they say Jennifer Lawrence
Yeah.
to star as Holmes. I don't know, but just kind of crazy. Like you look at that and you look at the tech, and you, it's like over in Israel when Israel is the pioneer for a lot of tech. I know I'm gonna get a lot of hate for that,
Hmm.
but they pioneer a
It's
lot of
just
tech out
true.
there. It's
Yeah.
and I mean statistically speaking. And one of the techs that was amazing that came out of there, which I thought should have blown up a little bit more, and I have to see what ended up falling out uh, was the was COVID testing what they did was they
Hmm.
instead of looking at antibodies, instead of looking at virus growth and other stuff like that, what they ended up doing was like they're physicists working on the problem. Like, well, why don't we look at it like a physicist? And essentially, they looked for the harmonic frequency that the virus actually vibrated at, which was almost like a digital signature, kind of like a fingerprint, essentially for the virus. And you would blow into this little thing, and if it detected the virus signature, essentially of there, it could tell you within a day of you getting in contact and having it and replicating in your system, because it didn't need to actually have a full replication, so immediately right there and then.
I mean, hell, Israel is like one of the like core pioneers of RSA and the way public key encryption worked and stuff like that. It was all invented there. It's crazy to me. The kinds of stuff that come out of that country are genuinely amazing. Hell,
Right.
even Intel's old school 8088 processors, I think, were from their Israeli design firm or
Yeah.
research team. I want to say that's accurate. The micro cameras that are used and stuff, flexible stents came from it. Just all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, just kind of crazy, but I mean, we're just kind of crazy with Elizabeth Holmes and everything that's coming out, and she's gonna get her own Lifetime. Which does she make? Does she make money on that? Do they have to actually sell the rights for that, or is that like a journalistic type movie?
I'm positive that she's making some kind of money on it.
I
If
mean,
they mention her name, she's making money on it.
it's just kind of crazy. But anyways, guys, that's what we have. Oh, last piece, advice of the week, guys. If you are studying, I don't know. Let's talk about if you want to get into coding. One of the best things you can do is Code Academy. We're not sponsored by them. It's a great tool if you want to start with some basic stuff. They have a live left right system to be able to do that. That's like the number one thing I tell people. So we are working with the high school actually that I grew up in over in LA. And the idea was I want to get more kids into tech and technology and other stuff so they can kind of move up or get out of the system or whatever the case is. And one of the things I tell all the seniors going in there, listen, which they, by the way, Brooks, I actually was talking to them. They're starting their first computer science program over there next year, which is great.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So I got to talk with them and everything else. But prior to that, the kids would come up to me. I'm like, all right, Code Academy. That's some basic stuff over there. When you get started from there, there's that's a great one.
Skillshare
Udemy,
is pretty good too.
yeah,
Udemy,
Skillshare.
Team Treehouse for some things.
Yeah, but if you want to start from somewhere, HTML, CSS, HTML5, CSS, those are great, easy one starts. A lot of front end type stuff. JSON is great as well because that's what you're gonna use for connecting. But Code Academy is phenomenal. Start there. And that's my recommendation. You have any recommendations?
The only other one for online would be Skillshare, just because they've got just a ton of it. And I would learn Node to start if it were me at this point.
Yeah.
I still recommend Python. It's controversial, but it teaches a lot of good skills, and
Really
Python
is. I
runs
feel
on
like
free.
everyone says Python these days.
Well, it's made to run on everything from streetlights to satellites. So
Yeah.
like it it's incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
If you need a language that's almost as powerful as something like C, Python is probably your next best bet.
Yeah.
Used previously I would say Java, but it's really fallen out of fashion. A lot of stuff just it's not a security conscious language,
No.
and so a lot of people just don't allow it to run their
Well,
system.
well, it is security conscious. You just can't use it when the securities are turned on.
Yeah, that's the thing. Um, but yeah, that's probably what I would do. If we're gonna learn to code now. I would learn actually if you're doing a lot of AI stuff, Python's probably pretty
Yeah,
good.
no, Python's
There's
great.
a lot of AI libraries that work with it.
TensorFlow or PyTorch?
Tensor,
Tensor? Why Tensor?
because it's hardware backed.
All right, there you go, guys. Well, we guys appreciate it. Thank you for coming to the BSIT podcast, where we talk BS about IT and everything else. Like I said, brought to you by Blacksmith Integrations. We can help take care of all your stuff, mainly consulting, audits, and anything else. But thank you guys so much. Have a great day.
Bye, guys.